Israeli diplomats Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Lynn Milgram were murdered at an American Jewish Congress conference in Washington, D.C. Both Yaron and Sarah were followers of Yeshua. Well, I'm joined now by David Bosky, an Israeli Messianic Jew, and Emily Emanuel, Israeli activist. So, David, my friend, you were friends with Yaron. What can you tell us about this man who we lost last night?
Yeah, it's devastating. I found out this morning, very early, around 4:30 this morning, that he had been attacked. I actually heard about the news of the shooting last night, but I didn't realize who it was until this morning. And we're all devastated. Yaron was a wonderful, wonderful young man. I've known him and his family for probably 10 years at this point. We were both members of a congregation in downtown Jerusalem, Messianic Jewish congregation, and Yaron was just one of the best people that we had, a man full of zeal for life. He was such a bright guy, always curious about the faith, asking questions, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And, we're all still very much processing it. I heard the news this morning, and it's kind of a delayed reaction to begin the grieving process.
The tragedy is unimaginable. And you were telling me that there was actually, weeks, days away from a really beautiful thing that was about to happen. Can you share what his plans were in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I actually found out kind of through the news. He had met this wonderful, wonderful girl. They had fallen in love. And as far as I know, next week he was actually going to be returning to Israel, both to introduce his girlfriend to his family and also to propose to her. So it just layers the grief in a way that's very, very hard to process.
So Emily, let me bring you in. When you first heard this news, what was your reaction?
Just devastated. Honestly, I didn't know him personally, but I definitely had a lot of mutual friends with him. And just hearing their stories and talking to some of my friends who did know him, it could have been, honestly, anyone. They didn't know the assassin didn't know that he worked for the embassy. He just knew that he was Jewish, he was Israeli, and it's just awful to hear that. And my heart just goes out to his family. But I just feel like, just being in Israel right now, I just landed here, and just hearing, the sadness that is coming from the Messianic body over this it is really just upsetting.
What do you think this says about the global state of anti-Semitism? Emily.
I think that we're in a really bad place at the moment, and this is just bringing light to it. I was passing through the UK on the way to Israel, and for the first time in my life, even though I've grown up there all my life, I was scared to show my nails that has the Star of David on there, because
can we see them?
Yeah, sorry. Here we go.
Yeah.
Because I was so worried about some of the stories that I've been hearing from my friends in the UK. There's a protest at least 3 times a week in the UK, and there's Palestinian flags everywhere, and it's just really shocking. And for it to have led to a murder of 2 innocent young Israelis, in the name of freeing Palestine, where have we come to? This has got to stop.
So, David, you grew up in Israel. You are Israeli. What would you want the world to know about the current situation? Obviously, there's so many taglines and tweets and slogans and half-truths, and I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of trolls in the comments of this YouTube video. But what do you want, as someone who's been there, seen it, lived it, what do you want people to know about the situation in the Holy Land?
Yeah, that's a very deep question, probably a multifaceted answer. But I would say, as an Israeli and an American citizen, I'm a dual citizen. I grew up in Israel. I was born there. So I know what life is like there. And we know the challenges we face, political, geopolitical, the terrorism, the wars. That's not new to us. We've gotten used to it in a certain sense. But I'm actually stateside right now. I'm pursuing my PhD here in the States. What had probably been the most concerning development is I've never seen this level of just unashamed anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in America. That's something I've never experienced. I love my country. I'm a proud American and Israeli citizen, and it really concerns me because some of the things we're seeing today, I don't think this is new in human history. I know it's not new in Jewish history, and I think it's just anti-Semitism with a new face. This kind of woke cultural phenomenon that it's cool and it's fun and it's, you know, you're on the avant-garde of something to be able to be anti-Zionist. I mean, it's just anti-Semitism disguised as something else, and that's a really concerning development, and I'm hoping that people will open their eyes. They will open a history book and see where this goes if people don't begin to understand the signs. You know, Israel has always been called kind of the canary in the coal mine. If you want to see what's happening, see what's going on with Israel, and people are very prone, for whatever reason, I think it's a spiritual reason, to fight against those things that are precious to God, and I know his people are very precious to him.
Amen to that. You know, Emily, you and I have talked a lot in the past about why anti-Semitism, and kind of going back to what you were talking about. You know, we have Jewish friends in Australia that are terrified to show their Jewishness. Obviously, in the UK, Sweden. I mean, you could go down the list of where. I mean, I naively thought that this couldn't happen again, right? Never again. And to see, you know, Kanye West come out with a new song called Heil Hitler. Obviously, he's kind of off his rocker, but why? What is driving this anti-Semitism? Where is it coming from? You spend your life recently kind of figuring out, you know, how to combat this. And I think a lot of people watching this are just like, I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I feel, you know, not equipped. I see this is happening now in the United States. People are being murdered over this. What would your encouragement be to someone who's watching this? This feels totally helpless to do anything about it.
You know, me and you have talked about this, Raj, before, but I used to be that person back in university. I wasn't a believer. I am Jewish, but I was an anti-Israel, self-hating Jew. And I wrote my whole university dissertation on it. And two things that I really think that just go hand in hand with this hatred is, number one, it is, just like David said, deeply spiritual. And it goes back, you know, thousands of years, that there is just a hatred, deep hatred. The enemy of, you know, the father of lies hates the Jewish people, hates God's people. So there is a spiritual component to it. But then there's also this kind of almost like these people who want to do a good thing, want to fight for a cause because they don't know what to stand for, almost like they've lost their own identity and they want to stand for something. And this being pro-Palestinian at the moment is just the cool thing to do. It feels like you're on the right side if you're on the Palestinian side, just because they're louder, that they're, you know, sharing more on social media. But actually, you talked, every single person that I've ever talked to who has been this loud anti-Israel, very outspoken opponent of Israel, and I've asked them very simple questions about Israel's history. I've asked them, have they even taken a plane ride to the land and checked it out for themselves and met people? Do they know Israelis? And most of the time they don't, and they've never been here. And it's just this huge ignorance alongside a massive propaganda push towards this pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel narrative. And it's just this play of Israel is the bad guys, and somehow Hamas, these terrorists, have turned into the good guys. I just don't understand. It's completely bonkers.
So, David, what would you say to someone who says, if you say, I am pro-Israel, I stand with Israel and the Jewish people, you know, and you wave an Israeli flag, that almost by definition means that you, I hate having to use this word, but, you know, endorse genocide or the killing of babies or mass murder, or you go down the slogans, right? Whenever we talk about Israel in the comment section, it's like, oh, well, you love the killing of babies. It's like, what? No, but how would you respond to someone who says, you know, maybe even this guy who did this, you know, when he murdered them, he was shouting "Free Palestine" and "I did this for Gaza." So how can you be quote unquote pro-Israel and also communicate that you're not necessarily anti anyone else?
Yeah, great question. I'm on a college campus right now, actually, and I've had a fair amount of conversations with students here who most of whom are genuinely curious about, they don't understand the situation, they don't understand the history, the politics, and I've had really good opportunities to sit down with people and kind of educate them. You know, I'm on a lot of group chats. I'm sure a lot of us are, and I'm on groups that even, they publicize pictures of what's going on in Gaza, and it's devastating to see. I have two young boys. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. I love them with my entire heart. So anytime I see suffering, you see your own children's faces. So I don't think there's a single Israeli on planet Earth who doesn't see the images that we're all seeing and feel devastation. The issue is who is to blame for that devastation. And I think it's quite simple for people to be able to do very basic research to understand the basics of both organizations. I was in the Army. I served in the IDF for 3 years. I was a combat medic. Every Israeli soldier will tell you that we are given something called Ruach Tzahal. It's the spirit of the IDF. It's this little laminated card that we carry around with us that has the principles of the IDF, what every Israeli soldier is meant to believe, to embody, to practice. These are things like the purity of human life, the purity of your weapon, how to use and not use your weapon in specific ways. There's a high moral standard that every Israeli soldier is trained in from the moment they're drafted. On the other side, anyone could Google the charter of an organization like Hamas, who has been very open from its inception. They exist to destroy the state of Israel, to kill every Jew no matter where they live. So when you really compare kind of the basic ideologies of these two organizations, it's like Emily was saying, it's mind-boggling for people not to see the difference. So I think it's very easy if people actually want to look into these things. It's not hard to find. I think a lot of people are in echo chambers. Like we've said, people think that, if it's on social media and my friends are posting it, it must be true, it must be real. It's really not hard to see the truth. It's really not hard to find the truth in these things. When I tell people, I've sat with people and I said, do you realize that there are 2 million Arab Israeli citizens in Israel? People talk about apartheid and genocide. We have 2 million Israeli Arab citizens who live in Israel. People here had no idea. They'd never even heard of such a thing. And I'm shocked to see how uninformed and uneducated people all over the world, but even in the West, are to very basic truths. The fact that we have Arabs in our government, in our Supreme Court. I have many, many personal Arab Israeli friends. We love these people. It goes back to what one of our famous prime ministers, Golda Meir, used to say. We can forgive them for killing our children, but we can't forgive them for forcing us to kill theirs. No Israeli citizen wants to see suffering, wants to see death. We want peace. We tried for peace back in 2005. I was actually in the army in the summer of 2005 when Israel handed back the Gaza Strip. There's been effort after effort to seek peace in the Middle East, and Israel's really the only person with a hand extended. But we're also not going to be the kind of people who just lay down if we're attacked. We're going to protect our people. We're going to protect our civilians. And we're going to do everything we can to minimize civilian and human casualties in Gaza. That's not what we want. And it's unprecedented in the history of urban warfare for someone to do as much as the Israeli military has done to try and preserve life. We also want to get our hostages out. But we have to eliminate this threat that has been on our border for far too long.
And to your point, David, about these slogans and these social media posts that people have no idea the context. There's actually a pretty famous example a couple days ago. Let me read you the headline from the Jerusalem Post. UN retracts aid chief's claim that 14,000 Gazan babies will die in 48 hours without aid. The UN later cited a report that said that there could be 1,100 cases of malnutrition in children of Gaza between April 2025 and March of 2026, a time frame of 1 year, not 2 days. But how many people read that retraction? How many people around the world thought to themselves, oh, that was a mistake? But it was parroted around the world that 14,000 babies were going to die in 2 days because of Israel. I just had the Israeli Consul General, Israel Bahar, on, and he said, listen, zero people, I'm quoting him, 0 people have died in Gaza because of starvation, because of this war. And so there's just a massive disconnect between reality and what they read on social media. Famously, there was this conversation on the Joe Rogan podcast between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray. And there was this kind of viral moment where Douglas Murray was like, "You've never been there?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's not, who cares? It's not a big point." And Douglas was like, "No, it's a very big point. You've never been there, and yet you've made kind of this quasi career out of criticizing Israel." And I do think there's so many people, I've been to Israel 30 times, and when I debate people who've never been there, I'm like, you have no idea what you're talking about. But that doesn't, say that people aren't hurting. Of course, this is a complicated, nuanced, interwoven conflict. And so there's just so much to talk about. But maybe as we start to wrap this up, Emily, what would you say to people who say this? Listen, I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't hate Jewish people. I have Jewish friends. I'm just anti-Zionist. And because I'm anti-Zionist, I don't think they would say this is excused for what happened yesterday in DC, but it's kind of understandable how something like this could happen. So again, I'm not anti-Jewish. I'm just anti-Zionist.
Gosh, that is such a good question, Raj, because I've got that probably every week when I speak to someone. And yeah, I think that anti-Semitism has taken on many forms throughout the years. It's taken on religious forms, in the Christian persecution against the Jews in the European age of Christendom. It's taken forms of the Jews being wealthy, and that's what brought on the Holocaust is that it's the Jews that are causing all the problems, and the fact that they're not having jobs. But now it's taken on a different cloak, and the anti-Semitism is now taken on the form of anti-Zionism and anti-Israel rhetoric. And what I usually say to people is that, well, 90%, probably over 90% of Jews are Zionists. So if you are not, if you are if you're not against Jews, but you're against Zionism, then you are against 90% of the Jewish people's very core value of what they believe and who they are as a people group. And so I usually say that the land of Israel and the Jewish people cannot be disconnected from one another. They are a people, and they are it is a religion, and they are a people, and it is a culture. And so it's all together one. And to separate those two is to kind of take away the essence of what even a Jew means.
Well, Emily, David, thank you so much. And my friend watching, keep it right here on CBN News. We're going to obviously be updating you on this story and everything that happens with Israel, the Holy Land, and hopefully we don't have any more stories like this when it comes to anti-Semitism. But covering this subject, unfortunately, I think we will. So keep it right here on CBN News. Again, David, I'm so sorry for your loss. Praying for you, brother, and praying for the families of those affected. But as for now, again, thank you, my friends, and God bless.
Raj.